I can't believe it's taken this long for me to get this comparison set up. We're currently sitting in a 2025 Honda FL5 generation Civic Type R, the king of front-wheel drive cars currently on the market, and today we're comparing it against the 2025 Hyundai Elantra N with a dual-clutch transmission. You might be thinking, why would I compare a manual Type R against an automatic Elantra N? The answer is very simple. The manual transmission that comes standard in the Elantra N sucks. I absolutely hate the clutch. It has no feedback whatsoever. The shifter is rubbery and vague. I lived with an Elantra N manual for 2 weeks, and I've reviewed other examples as well, and the manual is easily one of the worst parts of that car for me. But really the question here is not whether the Type R is the more capable car. It absolutely should be, given it costs $10,000 more in terms of base price. It has 40 extra horsepower and weighs 150 pounds less. But the real question is, for your extra $10,000, are you actually getting the significantly better car? Is it worth that extra 10 grand? Ultimately, most buyers of these cars are not turning them into dedicated track cars. They may take these cars to the track like I do with my Integra Type S, but it also needs to be a practical and comfortable daily. Now, when I say $10,000 price difference, that's assuming you can get either of these cars at MSRP. I don't know what the current dealer situation is with the Elantra Ns, but Type Rs, you can still expect quite a bit of markup. So in terms of specs, this Type R, of course, is powered by the K20C1 engine. It's a 2-liter turbocharged inline 4-cylinder. It makes 315 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. You only get a 6-speed manual transmission, a mechanical LSD, adaptive dampers, a valved exhaust, and 19-inch wheels with Michelin PS4S tires. And we have Brembo brakes with 13.8-inch front rotors and 12-inch rear. The Elantra's brakes are actually slightly bigger. The owner, Ben, actually has modified this slightly, but he was kind enough to revert some of those mods back to stock for me for this video. But the mods that are still on here include Swift Spec R lowering springs that still work with the adaptive dampers, a very mild AWE touring exhaust, the same one I have on my Type S, a PLM strut tower bar, which does virtually nothing given the chassis rigidity of modern cars like this, and we have a Purell Stage 1 intake and a stay-tuned front lip. Very mild mods. None of these should drastically alter the driving dynamics. This car has dual axis front suspension that should reduce torque steer, multi-link rear suspension, and it weighs just under 3,190 pounds. So about 150 pounds lighter than the Elantra N. So more power, lighter, $10,000 more expensive. I've driven so many Type Rs and Type Ss, but let's drive this one once more to set the baseline and then compare it against that Elantra N. Always been a big fan of the Type R and Type S interior. These are a very well-designed interior, very ergonomic. We have a tablet style touchscreen for your infotainment, your wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, but you still retain physical buttons for your climate controls. You get a wireless phone charger, 2 USB ports, a height adjustable seat here. Love the Type R seats, way better than the ones in the Type S. And we get very intuitive buttons on the steering wheel for your driving assists and your audio. So we have this in individual mode currently, where we've set the engine and engine sound and gauge to the maximum plus R setting, steering in sport, rev match in sport, which is the most aggressive setting actually, and suspension, we're leaving it in comfort because the Type R active damping system increases the damping on the fly when you start driving harder, which I've not been a big fan of in the past because sometimes I just want the suspension to be in the softest mode. And I am right at home. It's such a capable car, and it has a low learning curve. You can just hop into it and start pounding on it. There is a little bit of torque steer, but since Ben was gracious enough to swap back on these stock wheels with no spacers, the torque steer here is pretty limited. When you add spacers, the torque steer gets exponentially worse. We have the auto rev match on, and it works brilliantly. Oh yeah. The straight line performance is impressive. For a front wheel drive vehicle, this puts the power down, not only in the straights, but also coming out of corners. This mechanical diff works really well. It feels natural. You don't feel it overcompensating by sending an excessive percentage of torque to the outer front tire. You don't really feel the diff working at all. You just have a lot of traction. But what I'm not a fan of is this suspension. Obviously the swift lowering springs probably don't help with the compliance or lack thereof, but most of what I'm feeling here over these bumps, like right there, is the active damping system increasing damping dynamically, even though I'm in comfort mode. Oh, a little bit of torque steer there. I love the way this engine for a turbocharged 4-cylinder pulls to redline, 7,000 RPM. It's very eager to rev out. There is turbo lag below around 3,500, but I would say if you keep this engine above 4,000, you're in the sweet spot, and it'll rev out all the way to 7,000. It's not the best sounding engine, even for a Turbo 4. The AWE exhaust and the PRL intake do help a bit, but ultimately we're still talking about a 4-popper. But look at the way this car corners. So much stability. It just gives you so much confidence to attack corners hard. I've done like 25 track days in my Integra Type S now, which is virtually the same car. And the way this car makes me feel when I turn into a corner, I have so much confidence. I can feel the limits very easily. Low learning curve, but also the car has a lot of adjustability. Oh, close that. You can trail brake this car into a corner and get the rear to step out just enough to help you rotate into the corner. That's what you want from a front wheel drive car. If you drive it to its limit, it gives you that adjustability. When you drive it even slightly below the limit at 80%, 70%, like in the canyons, it just gives you full grip, full confidence everywhere. It's just the torque steer that is slightly bothersome, but you learn to drive around it. I love the brake pedal feel from these Brembo front brakes. They hold up pretty well on the track as well. Just really firm pedal pressure, lots of modulation, not grabby whatsoever. And you can just leave this in third gear even for some of the tight corners. On track, I never use second gear, whether it's Laguna, Sonoma, Thunderhill. I just keep it in third and let the mid-range torque pull me out of the corner. I find that's the quickest way to drive the Type R and Type S. Of course, the Type S has a little bit more torque, but I think the Type R feels about the same in most situations. But yeah, the active damping, it just annoys me. If I want it to be in comfort, let it be in comfort. Don't automatically stiffen up the damping because you think I want it to be stiffer. What's the point of calling it comfort mode? In Plus R mode, forget about it. Way too stiff, not only for a bumpy road like this, but I've even seen some people say it's too stiff for the racetrack. So the suspension tuning of this car is not ideal, and it all comes down to electronic tuning. The Type S stock suspension, even though the hardware is the same, the electronic tuning is different, and it makes a world of difference. It makes that car way more comfortable on the road and more confidence inspiring when you push it. My complaints with the Type R, and they are pretty limited, come down to the electronic damper tuning and the torque steer. Besides those two things, this car is just about perfect. Oh, and I guess the engine sound isn't great, but otherwise this car is so capable. Even for $46,000, I think you're getting a lot of value for money because of just how daily drivable, practical, spacious this car is. And yet at the same time, you can tear up a canyon road, you can tear up a racetrack with minimal mods. But should you save $10,000 and go with the Hyundai Elantra N DCT? That's the question. All right, we're now in the 2025 Hyundai Elantra N DCT. I've been wanting to compare this against the Type R for so long, so I'm actually stoked to have made this review possible. So in terms of specs, we're powered by a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder turbo, but this only makes 276 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque, so it's down about 40 horsepower. However, if you do press this red NGS or N-Grin shift button, it does give you 20 seconds of overboost, which gives you an extra 10 horsepower. This is an 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but these paddle shifters doesn't feel that much worse than my NC1 NSX, so I'm not sure if that's a compliment to Hyundai or a criticism of the NC1. I think it's actually more of the latter, to be honest. As standard, this includes an ELSD, adaptive dampers, a valved exhaust, 19-inch wheels with PS4S tires, all the same things you get as standard with the Type R, except obviously this is an ELSD rather than a mechanical LSD. These Brembo brakes have slightly bigger rotors in the Type R, 14.2 inch in the front, so 0.4 bigger, and 12.4 inch in the rear, also 0.4 bigger. Strut front suspension, multi-link rear, and this car weighs a little over 3,300 pounds with a DCT. This also has electric power steering like the Type R. On paper, outside of the engine differences, these cars are very closely matched. The only mod that the owner Jeremy has put on this one is some front camber bolts. Impressions of the interior, I actually think it is very good for the money. I don't think it feels quite as nice as the Type R's, but it's very, very close. I do like the physical buttons for the climate controls. I just think the knobs feel slightly cheaper and there's a little bit more piano black. But honestly, for $36,000, this is more than I was expecting. Compare this to a GR Corolla, and this feels like a luxury car. Pretty sizable back seat. Because there is a rear strut tower brace, the otherwise cavernous trunk is limited in how much you can put in it. Let's get this fired up. So in terms of drive modes, we have this solid N button, which puts you in the most aggressive everything. Basically, you use this if you're going to the track. But we're actually going to press this N button on the left, which is the N custom mode. And basically, if I can figure out how to work this touch screen, the infotainment is slightly laggy. We can adjust all of these things individually: engine, transmission, exhaust, ELSD, ESC, suspension, and steering. I already have it set at how I like it. So steering in normal, suspension I have it maxed out in Sport Plus, because as we're about to find out, this suspension is way, way more compliant and works way better on a canyon road. So with that, into manual mode. Yeah, so right away, I can notice there's a lot less power. It's down about 40 horsepower on paper, but in reality, I think it's more. The Civic Type R's engine is a bit underrated from what I've seen. That being said though, this suspension is so much better for a bumpy road. So much more compliant, and it doesn't do that silly adjustment because the car thinks you're going faster and therefore wants stiffer damping. Something's flying around in the back seat, but oh well. Wow. This ELSD, I've said it before in other Elantra N reviews, but it's so aggressive in the way it locks up. The more throttle you give it on corner exit, the more you feel it just pull you out of the corner. There's a lot less torque steer here. Of course, that could be simply due to the fact that there's a lot less torque. But I do find it slightly easier to drive this car quickly because of that less busy steering wheel. That said though, even in the most aggressive suspension and ELSD setting, this car doesn't feel as pointy. The turn-in isn't as sharp. There's a little bit of a delay when you first turn into the corner. The steering also not as responsive. And on the straights, this engine doesn't quite hold a candle to the Type R. Also, I think I'm sensing a slight amount of power drop off towards the 7,000 RPM breadline. This exhaust sound actually is not bad though for stock. Oh yeah, that ELSD working its magic. One of the most aggressive diffs I've felt in any front wheel drive car from the factory. Actually, I think this is the most aggressive. The dual clutch is very good. 8 speeds, so the gears are very close together. The shifts are nice and snappy, both the upshift and the downshift. A little bit of understeer there. Outright grip definitely feels slightly below that of the Type R, but what you gain in compliance is very significant. I will say though, Ben swapped on the stock Type R active damper system because he wanted me to experience his Type R as close to stock as possible. But normally he has the Integra Type S DE5 ADS system, which works way better. And I think if I were comparing it in that configuration against this, I would prefer the Type S suspension or Type R with Type S damping. Because in Sport Plus, I do think the Type S setting does feel a bit better than this. It's more aggressive, which aids in cornering and overall turn-in response, but at the same time, in comfort mode, it's plenty comfortable. The comfort mode in this actually I think is quite wallowy, but very impressive car dynamically. It's easy to drive this car quickly. There's a very low learning curve, even lower than the Type R because of that lack of torque steer. I do wonder how this car would feel with an extra 50 horsepower though. It just feels ever so slightly underpowered. 276 isn't bad, but 315 is a lot better. Let's try something. Let's press Zygrene shift. Yeah, okay. It's noticeable, that extra 10 horsepower. But it still doesn't put it nearly on the same level as a Type R. I would love to review a lightly tuned Elantra N with the DCT. Bolt-ons tune, bring it up to like 320, 330 horsepower maybe, and otherwise just keep it stock. The suspension feels really good for this type of driving. The brakes feel great. I think the brakes in the Type R have a little bit more of a firm pedal, which I like, but overall, yeah, this car could do with a bit more power, and I think the chassis can handle it. Zygrene shift. Not bad, but not Type R quick. All right, conclusion time. This is a really close one. From the factory, the Type R suspension is so poor that I would give this car the win. But because it is so easy to swap in, woo, squirrel, the DE5 ADS module for just a few $100s, and it's still an OEM part, when you compare that setup against this, there's a significant advantage with the Type R. The extra power, the better steering response, the lighter weight. It does feel like the more capable car. But is it $10,000 better? Well, if you're talking purely from a performance standpoint, I would say maybe not. You throw some bolt-ons in a tune on the Elantra N and you basically have Type R level performance, in theory. However, from a daily drivability standpoint, I mean, even comparing these two cars side by side in terms of overall footprint and size, surprisingly, the Type R actually looks a little bit bigger. It is a truly large hot hatch. I don't know which car has more rear legroom. It might be close, but both cars are quite practical. The advantage of the Type R comes when you open up that hatch. So you do get the extra usability, the slightly better interior, and the fact that you're dealing with a Honda product, which should be more reliable and easier to maintain in the long run. From a pure value proposition standpoint, taking these two cars at face value, this Elantra N, I think, is the value play. You get so much performance and usability and quality that I would not blame you one bit if you actually thought this was the better overall package. If you are okay paying more for the Type R, you are getting more car. Just swap in the Integra module and you'll have a significantly better daily driver, and Canyon car for that matter. So big shout out to the owners, Ben and Jeremy. Let me know what you think about this comparison. Do you think the extra $10,000 for the Type R is justified? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.